Hi everyone. No matter how much I sometimes question whether the Auditor General actually understands what her job is, and I actually do that quite frequently, there are a few programs which I just can't wait for her to take a comprehensive look at. Right now, chief among them is the G-8 and G-20 summits. I question whether it's the wisest thing in the world in an era of economic downturn to spend $1.1 billion on its meeting for 20 people. And after all, in reality, that's all the G20 is a meeting for 20 people. And G8 is only a meeting for 8 people. I question whether it is the best use of money in the Canadian context to do so. And there's a number of different expenditures which I openly question. First and foremost, it will cost about $500 million for both the G8 and G20, which amounts to about $475 million for each in American dollars. I use American for the purpose of comparison. I want to compare this G8 to the last G8, which was held in Italy, where only $260 million was spent on the entire program. Now, one might say that you cannot compare the cost of the two, since we are more likely to have violence in North America for a G8 conference than in a European country, because of the track record we've had with violence at international gatherings, especially the last meeting of the G8 in the United States, and the meeting of the G20 last fall. The meeting of the G20 last fall in Pittsburgh, I believe, only cost $18 million for the entire thing. Now, it was a different format and already used some already established security in a building which was more or less designed for it. Yet there is a dramatic cost difference between the two summits. And if we look back to the last time the summit was held in Kananaskis, Alberta, last one was held in Canadian soil, the entire cost to the summit was only about $250 million. Now, you would argue that there was only one summit, so let's times it by 2 and you get about $500 million. So basically, in the wake of September 11th, when terrorism was a real threat to global security, you only paid about half of what you're paying now. Now, the government claims there are a number of different reasons why the costs have increased so dramatically. Chief among them is that the use of the military this time around, instead of the use, has been put to a second burner in favor of the use of police forces. The military do not get overtime, and they are generally paid less than Canadian civil police forces. Some would argue that they're paid too much less than Canadian civil police forces, and I would agree with them. Our military is very important. However, in a summit where the security is an issue, and much of the security work would be, some would say, better handled by the military, the government claims that the opposition, based on a 2006 campaign ad, where they pointed out that Stephen Harper wanted an increased military presence in cities, end quote, which was viewed in negative context, would cause opposition to complain. When has that stopped the government from doing anything else? I further question whether it's a good use of money in the $50 million infrastructure funding for the Huntsville and area. And I used and area very deliberately. This includes improvements to general infrastructure, and I will admit Highway 60 is in need of repair. Like I said, I was born and raised in Huntsville. But also some very odd spending choices. Chief among them, $100,000 for a gazebo in Orville, Ontario. Now, if you go over there and you have to look at it, Atlas, you're not the only one. Orville is about 20 minutes from Parry Sound and about an hour and a half from Huntsville. It depends which road you take. The chances of the gazebo in Orville having anything to do with the G-8 is beyond me. But we will get back to that later. Another choice which I seriously question is spending $2 million for a Canada pavilion for international journalists who will be hard at work throughout the G8 summit and G20 summit as well. Chief among them is the so-called fake lake, which costs about $500,000. I propose, if Mr. Harper and his government wanted to set journalists up at a real Muskoka lake, they should go to the Huntsville beer store, where there is a puddle in the middle of the parking lot, which the locals have given the term Beer Lake. This puddle has been there for since time immemorial, and is probably the biggest body of standing water in any parking lot in Huntsville. Yet, it is still a fake lake, Mr. Harper, so why not set some Muskoka chairs up by the beer store parking lot and we can all enjoy it. I finally question whether Muskoka was a good choice for the summit. The historic question is whether the G8 summit would be held somewhere remote enough to prevent major security threat. In some ways, it seems like Huntsville would be a good choice. However, I say that there are major transportations to and from Huntsville. Highway 11, which runs north-south from Toronto, only about 2.5 hours, and Highway 60, which connects to Highway 417, in which you can be in Ottawa in about 3 to 4 hours. I question whether the placement of the G8 summit in Huntsville had more to do with Muskoka Parry Sound's current MP, Tony Clement, the Minister of Industry, who, as those in Huntsville will know, during the 2006 election campaign only won by 21 votes. That's right, 21 votes. Should the Conservative government ever lose disfavor with the people of Canada, as I think is probably going to be the case pretty soon, if they continue this spending, and Mr. Clement be met with a challenger who, again, could maybe challenge him to some debates of the issues, unlike the previous challenger, my suspicion is Mr. Clement is going to be in a little bit of trouble with the electorate. So, we have a pork barrel project in order to keep Mr. Clement some job security in case of stormy weather. I hope with my whole heart that the people of Huntsville next time around will see past Mr. Clement's bribes and return Mr. Clement to where his home really is, in the Southern Ontario and the Brampton area. That's my opinion about this G8 and G20 summit. I look forward to seeing it because we don't get good comedy anymore these days on the CBC since Mr. Harper cut it.